We had our current administration send out a tweet and recognize that it is Pride this month and recognize the LGBTQ plus community. President Trump tweeted on June 7th this: as we celebrate LGBT Pride Month and recognize the outstanding contributions LGBT people have made to our great nation, let us stand in solidarity with the many LGBT people who live in dozens of countries worldwide that punish, imprison, and even execute individuals on the basis of their sexual orientation. He goes on to write, my administration has launched a global campaign, to decriminalize homosexuality and invite all nations to join us in on this effort. Now, this tweet came a week after he unveiled some initiatives to roll back even more rights for people of the LGBTQ plus community, mainly trans. How are we feeling?
Survey says, like, no, I don't buy it. Like, first of all, it's all spelt correct, so I don't even know if he really wrote that.
And that's a great point. Right. That's a great observation.
And it didn't seem like it came at 4 a.m. on a toilet. But at the same point, you don't get to roll back protections for LGBT community. You don't get to remove us from the census. You don't get to do all these things and then come back and act like these corporations and just be like, oh, it's Pride Month, I'm gonna join in. This way, what he's really doing is giving his own supporters ammo to be like, see, he likes the LGBTQ people. What are you talking about? Because this way, it's just gaslighting, so he can continue to do what his administration has been doing.
Yeah, it's a typical tactic that I see from Trump where he says two things at the same time. So when he receives criticism, he can go ahead and cite the more favorable quote or comment that he made. But really, I mean, and this is an issue with a lot of politicians, not just Donald Trump. They will talk the talk, but behind the scenes, they don't walk the walk. And with Trump, he goes even further where he does away with progress that's been done for the LGBT community. And that progress to begin with wasn't even enough. So it's really unfortunate to see how regressive this administration has been when it comes to civil rights, human rights, and the treatment of the LGBT community.
I find it fascinating and not the most positive sense of the word, but the fact that it's 2019, Anna, you make a great point that we've made progress, and even as you said, it's not enough progress. But the fact that now we have to deal with not being afforded basic human rights, or things that like healthcare, or allowing people that are trans or LGBTQ plus to serve our country and to protect the country that our current administration is so I wouldn't say in love with, but feels is their right to have. I still can't wrap my head around that, and I feel bad saying that. But I feel people are watching feel the same way. But I can't articulate how. What's the word I'm looking for? What I'm trying to say. It's just, again, I can't believe this is still happening. Heather?
I can. I mean, we're a country that was built on the genocide of an entire nations of people, the brutal enslavement of people, and here we are in 2019. I think that there's a major difference between the illusion of progress and actual real progress. And I feel that, especially amongst certain members within the LGBTQ community, that, well, we've got ours, so now we're fine and we don't have to do anything more. And there's this illusion of safety that we think we have. And I remember being in New York and fighting for my right to get married, and was so grateful when it got passed federally, but I also recognize all of the work that it took just to be afforded a basic human right. And there is so much more work to be done. And that is why I feel that Pride is so important, period. We have 1 month out of the year with which we get to celebrate who we are. And within that, also getting to remember that Pride wasn't started as a celebratory thing. We are fighting for our lives. We're fighting for the right to exist, period, end of sentence.
I'm glad you brought up why we celebrate Pride. Because I think a lot of younger generations, especially like newer millennials, Gen Z, they haven't I don't want to say they haven't done the research or gone back and learned their history, but they really haven't.
They don't have to. It's presented to them as this is how it always was. Again, it's a little bit of our country's habit of revisionist history. I mean, we're dealing with. I was at Life Paul. I had a very amazing dinner with Lorna Luft, who is Judy Garland's daughter, who also is in Greece too. Sorry, gay geeking. But she was explaining how the Stonewall movement happened on the day of Judy Garland's death. It was one of the reasons why the LGBTQ community weren't going to have it anymore. They lost like their biggest ally that was out there. And she was explaining to her granddaughter, who had taken this incredible picture in a rainbow shirt with a rainbow behind her, that only 50 years ago it was illegal to be gay.
Right.
And she was like, "What do you mean?" Like they just have no concept of our history. I mean, we still don't have all-inclusive history, LGBTQ history in the history books in our schools. Our comprehensive sexual education is not queer inclusive. There's a lot of things that are still missing to make us be a part of the narrative of where we came from. But where we are today, miraculously, there are like my niece who is 7 holds up pride things online and says, proud of Uncle Danny and all this other stuff without knowing where the struggle that it took to at least get to the point to be able to do something like that on Facebook and how much more we have to go.
I also want to just raise an issue with how the Trump administration and Trump specifically will justify our interventions or our wars against Muslim majority countries because of their treatment of the LGBT community. But at the same time, let's take a good hard look at Trump's base, specifically the evangelical base that voted him into office. What have they been doing? I remember back in 2012, we covered this story about how evangelical Christians were traveling to Uganda and pushing for laws that would literally have the death penalty for anyone who was found guilty of gay acts, right? So I bring that up because we have individuals in this country who push for the persecution and even the murder of members of the LGBT community. So
one thing about the Christian right and all of this other stuff is that is not what God was about. I'm a gay Christian, and to me, Jesus' friends were thieves and prostitutes. So he would be leading the Pride Parade. So I don't know what they think they're representing, but except for their own heavy hand on Judgment Day.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I mean, while you see generalizations about Muslims, like the right wing will make it appear as if they're all the same, which is not the case. I would argue, as you just did, the same applies for Christians, right? You have fundamentalist evangelicals who are very different from, I would argue, the majority of Americans who have Christian faith, right? They're not pushing for the murder of members of the LGBT community. But with that said, I bring that up because we have no leg to stand on as a country when it comes to judging other countries and their treatment of others. We need to really look at how we're treating our fellow Americans who just happen to be different.
Right. Or people in your own family. I mean, I see a lot of these Christian mothers on the front line to ban abortion who are then kicking out their 14-year-old sons for being gay. So
we talk about treating people in our own country, right? Trump is also trying to change how we service homeless LGBTQ plus individuals. I think last Tuesday, he was wanting to dismantle make an amendment to the Equal Access Rule, which prevents discrimination in shelters on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, for me, that living in Los Angeles alone, okay, of course we know that there is a huge problem with displaced homeless people as well. So those are people who need a safe space to go as well. The streets are not safe, and then also you have another layer of people of color that are trans that are very that are now we're never be more susceptible to violence out on these streets. I don't understand what's the threat here of our administration against LGBTQ plus people. And I know we're talking about LGBTQ plus. It's not supposed to be so heavy, but this subject is heavy to me because these people need a safe space as well. Yes. They've been abandoned by, let's say they're in facilities that were offering healthcare or offering care to them if they have mental disabilities or mental impairments. That's gone for them. No support from families. It's like a not in my own backyard kind of situation. So I don't know. I just feel. I mean, there's really nothing more to say about it.
One thing that this administration is doing is really lining up the dominoes for a hero to follow. Like there is going to be somebody in our future that is going to come in and be able to help us with all of these different issues and be seen as somebody in the history books as an incredible hero to the LGBTQ community. And I'm just like holding out for that hero.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.